Hello humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Today we are going to answer the question everybody has. Who is Ersatz Cats? What is Perfect Pac-Man? What's going on here? Well guys, let me tell you something. KARL JOBST made a lot of mistakes during this trial, right? He basically beat himself by bad decisions. That's my opinion. But the reason I know as much as I do about this situation, and the reason a lot of YouTubers and commentators out there know as much as they do about the situation, is because of this man right here. This man is such a big KARL JOBST fan that he actually traveled to Australia on his own dime to sit in that trial and listen to the parties argue. You know, KARL JOBST made a lot of mistakes, and one of them is not having Ersatz Cats on his team, right? And it actually goes back to ego. Ersatz Cats would not admit this, but I'm telling you this right now as a person who's looking at it from the outside. The utmost expert in the KARL JOBST situation is not KARL JOBST. And KARL JOBST could not have that. The person that has the most expertise on this situation is Ersatz Cats. If you would, he spent $600,000 on his defense. Let me tell you something. If he would have grabbed $50,000 and paid for this man's expenses to come over there and review all the documentation for timelines, I can almost guarantee you the results of this trial would have been different. I'm not saying that KARL would have won, but I could probably almost guarantee you that the damages would have been a lot less. Ersatz Cats knows more about KARL JOBST's situation than his lawyer. He has a better perception of what actually would happen even than KARL himself. And, you know, KARL just strikes me like the kind of person that his ego is so huge that he could not admit that there's somebody out there, right, that knows more than him on this subject, number one. Number two, Ersatz Cats is such a big fan, he probably wouldn't want to make him feel bad. But these trials are about winning. You know, they're about actually not losing money, and not having this man on your team, it was completely idiotic, right? A blind man could see that this man should have been there. He should have been in constant communication. He should have been there reviewing, you know, day after day to see what they miss, what they're going to talk about the next day. This man documented day by day, you know, not only the situations in the trial, but the stuff leading up to the trial. I made a playlist about this, you know, and linked it down below, you know, as far as the days he went to court and what he wrote about. And I actually had the reader just read it, right? Some people didn't like it because, you know, it's just a reader reading, but it's actually real important for the understanding of the trial, right? Even though you're going to get a slant point of view, which is, you know, a supporter of KARL JOBST, it still documents day by day what happened in the trial. And more importantly, it shows how frustrated Ersatz Cats was with KARL JOBST's lawyers missing and swinging and missing so many times during the trial. And I think that, to tell you the truth, just based on Ersatz Cats' observations during the trial, if I was KARL JOBST and I had paid over $500,000, you know, $600,000 he's claiming right now, to this lawyer that was so unprepared, according to other lawyers, even Luss says that this guy was unprepared at several points during the trial, I would not go back and appeal the case. I would actually sue the lawyers, and this is not legal advice, right, at all. I'm just a layperson. But if I had spent that much money, right, on a legal defense, you know, and get the poorest results possible, I wouldn't be looking at an appeal, right? But KARL JOBST his ego is so huge that he can't admit to himself that he got taken for a sucker, right? He can't admit that. He can't admit that he made that bad of a choice for lawyers. He's still claiming that these are great lawyers. They are not. And that's not from, you know, any haters. That's straight from his biggest supporter. And I am telling you that his biggest mistake, right, or one of his biggest mistakes, is not having Ersatz Cats on his team, right, to do quality control, if you will, on his arguments, on his statements. And, we can go into a descent into madness, right? Unfortunately, right, with this article here, which I'll make a separate video on, I'm not going to put it on here, but this Judge Ken Barlow's article is a mistake, right? This really here, that Billy Mitchell's team already cut it up, pasted it up, and is going to put it out there, right? This is not going to do well for an appeal, but regardless, I don't think he should appeal, guys. I think he should negotiate, right? That's just my layman's point of view. Try to minimize the damage as much as possible without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on another lawyer. But leading up to the results of the case, if you would have had one Ersatz Cats there, let me tell you guys, that team would have run a lot better, even if it was the same lawyer, right? Even if it was the same lawyer, I think that the case would have gone a lot better for one KARL JOBST, right? But he couldn't admit, right? I'm telling you, he could not admit that this man knows more than him when it comes to this case. Another mistake that he made is not actually promoting this man. As much as he's promoting, his other stuff and talking about the case and making cheating videos about Billy Mitchell, he really should have honed in on how much evidence this particular gentleman has for people to come in and read, right, what he had on here. A lot of the things that he does make sense. Some of the things are descended to madness, right, because he's really anti-Billy Mitchell, right, but he chronicles everything, right, whether you agree with his conclusions or not, the timelines are there, right? He'll put everything out there, and then you can make up your own mind. You don't necessarily have to come to the same conclusions he has, but the gathering of evidence leading up to this trial, it is the best that's anybody that put it out there. This is by far the most comprehensive website when it comes to this trial, and it is a sin that KARL JOBST didn't use them in any legal capacity. It's just, and he might even disagree with this, right? But if it was me, right, I would swallow my pride and say, you know what, you know more about this than I do, and I might not have the best point of reference because I am the defendant, right? And he who represents himself has a fool for a client, as Abraham Lincoln said. And you need the best team that you can put together. And not having him on the team really hurt him. It did. And let me tell you, I'm going to play. If you want to descend into madness so you can see a sample of his work, I'm going to play the first third. I can't play everything, guys, because there's too much. After I'm done with this, I'm going to play the first third about did KARL JOBST lie about the Billy Mitchell lawsuit. It's just so long, but at least the first third can give you a good, entry point into this man's writings. And if you want to read the rest, go ahead. I'm going to put a link down below to his website. I'm going to put a link down below to my playlist to the other readings so you can get familiar with his work. But it'll give you a good introduction on who Ersatz Cats is and what he did during the trial and how this really could have changed the narrative, because I'm telling you, this lawyer was not prepared the way he should have been prepared, right? And again, I'm not saying that KARL JOBST would have won, but I can almost guarantee you that the judgment wouldn't have been as much as it had been, because this guy got timelines wrong. He put things out of sequence. He didn't bring up evidence that was really relevant. I mean, Ersatz Cats broke it down every day, every miss that he had. He was, jumping out of his seat, uh, almost trying to correct the inaccuracies of this lawyer, and was just dismayed by his poor performance. And this comes from the biggest Karl Jobst supporter. That's how bad it was. Right? That's how bad it was. But anyway, guys, let me stop talking. My voice is going. For those, my voice goes in and out, guys. I have Reich's edema, and I deal with those issues from time to time, especially when I've been talking a lot. So I'm going to have the reader take over. There's no way I could read this. And you guys can get a sample. Grab a little taste of the Ersatz Cats madness. All right, humans, I will catch you on the next one. Enjoy the madness.
All of this is to set up discussion of what you already know is today's topic. Did Karl Jobst lie about the Billy Mitchell lawsuit? I was a bit taken aback these last couple nights, reading all the reactions to the ruling. And most of that ruling will be a subject of another upcoming write-up. At first I saw someone suggest that Karl lied about what he was being sued for, and that his GoFundMe was a scam. Specifically, some people thought Karl was being sued for calling Billy a cheater, and not for a factual inaccuracy about Billy's settlement with Apollo. And I immediately thought, well, that's silly. Everyone knows, right? We've all been discussing this case for years. I did an extensive Day Zero write-up in September, explaining in detail what this case was about. Did people really just have no idea all along? But apparently so. Again, I don't mean to lay blame here. The vast majority of folks with that misperception aren't malicious. Believe me, I understand, this case is a massive rabbit hole, and most of y'all have better things to do than keep up on every single detail. I personally would have made more of an effort to broadcast the underpinning of the lawsuit if I thought so many people would turn out to be uninformed about it, and would be so offended at learning their impression was incorrect. Like the earlier evidence bit, I guess I was too deep into the forest on this one. While I have the benefit of being able to address these cases at will, Karl was sort of in a bind. He wisely limited his discussion of the details of an ongoing lawsuit he was defending, but he did continue speaking at length about Billy being a cheater, which he could do because it was tangential to the lawsuit. And I guess this fed into the misperception folks had that this lawsuit was about cheating allegations? But I hope folks can approach this with enough good faith to understand that, just because they were ultimately misinformed or mistaken, does not mean any particular person was trying to mislead them. And that's what I hope to address today. I'm not interested in defending myself, as my writing was very clear. Rather, since Karl is still in a position where free discussion of his case can be difficult, I hope to lay out the facts for those who want them. What exactly was the lawsuit about? We'll get into the timeline of how JOBST presented the lawsuit in a moment. But first, since I already know some folks won't read Day Zero, no matter how many times I link it, let me offer a brief overview of what the lawsuit was about. Content warning: self-harm. In December 2020, months after an out-of-court settlement with Billy Mitchell, young YouTuber Apollo legend took his own life. 5 months later, Karl discussed this in a video about Billy and Todd Rogers titled, "The Biggest Conmen in Video Game History Strike Again." Here was the exact offending passage. Billy also sued YouTuber Apollo legend for $1 million. I haven't spoken about this publicly, but this lawsuit ultimately ended with Apollo giving in and settling with Mitchell. He was forced to remove all of his videos about Mitchell's cheating, and paid him a large sum of money. This left him deeply in debt, which required him to find extra work. But with his ongoing health issues, this was all too much of a burden, and he ultimately took his own life. Not that Billy Mitchell would ever care, though. In fact, when Billy Mitchell thought Apollo died earlier, he expressed joy at the thought. The lawsuit against Apollo was just as frivolous as the rest, and Apollo definitely would have won in court, but again, he was extremely ill and couldn't handle the ongoing stress. We'll dissect this a bit more later, but for now, you are allowed to state facts, even if they paint someone in a poor light. So legally, the only problem with this passage should be the claim that Apollo paid Billy a large sum of money as part of the settlement. At the time, it was believed to be true, but it turned out it was not. Why was this claim believed to be true? For one thing, it felt highly dubious that Billy would let Apollo walk away without even paying for so much as Billy's legal fees. Billy did bring on an actual attorney, of a sort, but he's a topic for another day. But here's the ironic twist: people in Billy's own circle were claiming Apollo was forced to pay Billy money. Note, please do not harass anyone mentioned in this or any write-up. If you want more deets, check out my lengthier explanation as part of Day 5. First, pro-Billy playwright Casey Ross announced that Apollo legend was seeking a settlement prior to any other such public announcement. We all thought it was ridiculous at the time, given Apollo's braggadocio in declaring he would never give Billy any money or delete his videos. And Casey's reference to a settlement was edited out of that YouTube comment soon after it was posted. But in retrospect, it was clear she knew of the settlement at a time when only Billy and his inner circle were aware of it. There were also Reddit comments, including one claiming to have knowledge of a financial payout from Apollo to Billy, well before any settlement was announced. Obviously, you can't rely on Reddit comments alone, but given these highly unlikely predictions were actually coming true, it gave a strong impression that Billy's camp was full of leaks. More importantly, someone on Team Truth, as I call it, had regular contact with a confidential source from Team Billy, who I will name only as Sam. Sam claimed in late 2019 that Guinness had agreed to reinstate Billy's fraudulent Donkey Kong scores. This seemed utterly preposterous at the time for many reasons, and yet it turned out to be absolutely true. Sam also confided that Apollo had reached out to Billy to settle, prior to any public knowledge of this. With those two accurate predictions under their belt, Sam then also reported that Apollo paid Billy a significant amount of money in the agreement. And again, this was all before any settlement was announced. Like it or not, this is definitely sufficient grounds for believing something to be true, although KARL obviously went too far in asserting it as known fact. Keep in mind also, there was no counter-narrative until Billy uploaded his video threat to KARL. More on that video in a moment. So we all just thought we knew a thing Billy didn't want to admit. And even then, we would come into yet more evidence after the fact. Immediately following Billy's first public claim that Apollo never paid him any money, one of our folks reached out to an anonymous source from Billy's circle, who I'll call Chris. Sorry, I cannot confirm if Sam and Chris are the same person. Chris didn't know that Billy had just publicly denied receiving any money from Apollo. So instead, they reported what they believed they knew, that Apollo did indeed pay out money, but maybe not as much as previously believed. This wasn't properly addressed at trial, because KARL's lawyers bungled the case tremendously. But that's a topic for another time.
New videos every Monday and Sunday. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Gen X Gamer. Remember to like and subscribe, click that notification bell, and remember, never ever be afraid to be happy. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.